Welcome to Gate Crashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, our code is this: to make all nerdy things more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe that you'll fall in love with. I'm Jake, I use he, him pronouns.
And I'm Dan, I use he, him pronouns as well. Today we're joined by Jordan Blum, whose writing you may know from shows like American Dad and Community. He's also the co-creator of MODOK, coming to Hulu soon, and co-creator and co-writer of MODOK Head Games from Marvel, whose third issue drops on February 17th. I've never had to say MODOK on air before. Jordan, how are you?
It's fun to say MODOK. I have to talk about him all day. I feel like that's my kids now recognize MODOK more than like Spider-Man, which is, I don't know, says something about
awesome.
My parenting, I guess. But I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. Sorry, I got there eventually.
No, it's cool. Like that's the future I want to see. I had a MODOK toy growing up because he was an Iron Man.
I remember that.
He's I love the goofier villains, and like the fact that he's a floating head is it's one of the greatest designs of all time. So I'm excited to see more of him. But
yeah, I mean, it's like that Jack Kirby design is everything. It's fantastic. I also had the same toy, by the way. I still do. And that toy was actually at the first table read for inspiration, and may appear in an episode.
That's I'm so excited because that's just one of those toys that I never thought actually existed. It was just like a fever dream that I had.
I was happy that he wasn't baby size like he was on the show. Remember, he like fit in a stroller in an episode. They dressed him up as a baby, and then he was just being pushed around. For some reason, they just made him tiny. But thank God the toy was to scale.
I thought that was a fever dream.
Wait, hold on, pause. Did you say that's to scale? Are you saying canonically that's how big MODOK is? He can fit in my hand?
Well, I mean, scale to the Iron Man, let's say. The Iron Man toy, yeah.
So before we get into the actual interview, Jake and I are known as pretty hard-hitting journalists in this comics world. So we always like to start off with a hard question.
Okay.
What's your favorite sandwich?
That's a great question. I grew up in New York, where deli culture is everything. So we take that very seriously. And my go-to, when I'd come home from school, my mom and I would always stop at the deli, and I would get roast beef on rye with Russian dressing. Very simple, classic New York sandwich.
So close to a Reuben. I cannot tell you how many comics creators love Reubens, but I'm a bigger fan of the roast beef. So
many Reubens.
It's a good answer.
I love Reubens as well. And then my backup would be chicken cutlet, honey mustard on a wedge.
Oh yeah, that's a solid move. So
I could talk sandwiches all day if you can't tell, but let's move on.
We'll have a roundtable discussion eventually on the show about sandwiches.
Why MODOK? Like, out of all of the weirdos in the Marvel universe, what made you gravitate toward MODOK?
I think kind of what you were saying. I've always kind of loved the oddities of Marvel. You know, the deep pulls from the Marvel Handbook, and I think what's fun about MODOK is outside of that Kirby design, he's such a larger than life character with his ego and the fact that is his weakness that brings him down. But he's brilliant, and he's a very capable, dangerous villain, but he always kind of gets in his own way. And I think it stops him from conquering the world. And he's got such an interesting backstory, that's kind of built out of tragedy. There's like this flowers for Algernon kind of thing of them forcing him to be experimented on and turning him into MODOK. And, that he sees himself, I think, as like a Dr. Doom, and it drives him crazy that he's not. And I love that he's a character that's very conscious of the fact that he's not an A-lister and kind of aspires to be. But he's just fun, and he's striking, and he stays with you, and he's iconic, and he kind of represents, everything that I love about comic books, which are these crazy, big ideas that, are grounded, and like you're kind of forced to take MODOK seriously because, Iron Man and Captain America do when they're facing off against him. So there's just so much to that character, and then kind of, taking a more comedic slant on him and creating and fleshing out the world of, AIM, having being able to tell these stories about what it's like to work in an evil organization and kind of the mundane elements of that, just it felt kind of ripe for comedy, and for us to kind of explore that in a way that a lot of other, Marvel media haven't done.
And it's funny that you brought up how he kind of sees himself. In Head Games, we get these almost like intrusive thoughts popping up in his thought bubbles. How do you think MODOK sees himself? Does he sees himself as that Doom level villain, but like, does he have any like a crisis of identity? Like, how does he see him?
Yeah, well, it's funny because if you look at the book, there's kind of three MODOK voices going on. You have the more kind of computerized, him calculating things. He is this computer brain super villain. Then the way he kind of addresses other people, he's kind of a braggart, and I think that's him compensating and wanting to be seen this way and demanding people kind of respect him, which is very transparent. And then we kind of introduced this self-doubt, I guess, that's creeping in, that is undermining him throughout this. But without revealing too much, there's a payoff to that, that you'll see read in issue 3, which comes out Wednesday. So we wanted to have this character because he is lots of different things, he can be portrayed that way, right? Like, that's one of the things we're playing with in the comic as well, is that, MODOK can be this lethal, dangerous, terrifying villain. He can be played as more of a joke. He can be what you need him to be. And I think that flexibility is really interesting, but I think we wanted to give each one of those kind of personas a voice that's combating for control of who MODOK really is.
With the comic, it's loosely tying into the show, it looks like, from what we've seen in issue 1 and 2. But what made you approach it that way rather than just like telling a story set in your own universe? Because it's such an interesting approach to a tie-in.
Well, I think Patton and I were, when we got approached to do the comic, we had no interest in just like doing an adaptation of the show. We'd just written 10 episodes of it. We love the show. It's a faithful but different take on MODOK, but we wanted to write the 616 Marvel Universe comic version, who is different, than the one that is on our show. And we thought like trying to kind of bridge those two worlds actually made for a kind of a metatextual story, that we could create a mystery of MODOK having memories of this life he never lived, which kind of represents loosely, elements of our show. And this guy who's always seen himself as this world conqueror, and again, he's got this computer brain, he's tunnel visioned, right? In that, like, I'm MODOK, I mind blast things, I take over the world, everyone should bow to me, there's really nothing else to me. And then having this weird life and family that kind of fights who he is or who he believes himself to be at his core. And we thought that like that's a really interesting place to start a character. And there's, as the series goes on, you kind of find out more and more about what this really is and what this represents to MODOK, like these desires he might have deep down. He might be a much more complex character than even he sees himself to be.
Yeah, because like this, I don't want to spoil anything about issue 2, but there's a scene in that where you see him as like a parent and someone who cares about other people, and like that's not normally how you see MODOK. So I'm super excited to see where this all goes, because it's such a fleshing out of a character who's been around for so long, to give them some more humility and some, I don't know, like a bigger heart. But on to one of my weird questions.
Sure.
How does MODOK shower? Like, he's got these little arms and a big head. Is it like a long loofah situation, or like AIM agents hose him out in the yard?
Well, he's got, his hover chair is like a Swiss Army knife, right? The thing is packed with lots of helpful tools. So I think he has a hose that just kind of raises above him, and he just hoses himself off. Though I like the idea of him punishing AIM agents by bathing him for their failings. I think that's fun. We in the show, I think we have a bit where he has his self-destruct mechanism is like a bowl comes around his face and he slowly fills it with water, like as he's debating whether or not to end it all.
Oh my God.
Don't we all?
So it's not the most practical way, I think, to end it all, but MODOK doesn't do anything the easy way.
He goes all out. So
Yeah.
He calculated it. It's fine.
what MODOK stories of the past did you try to draw from? And was one of them L.S. Cott's Secret Avengers?
Yeah. So you mean for the show or for the comic?
For your idea of MODOK. Let's go with that.
Yeah. Well, I loved Secret Avengers. I thought that was such a fun book, and him having that crush on Maria Hill was great, and I thought they got a lot of mileage out of that, and it was a really fun take on the character. So yeah, I think we pulled a little from that. The Mark Grunwald Captain America run is kind of seminal for me, where he's so insufferable that AIM hires the Serpent Society to murder him. So it's like a coup against MODOK, and they succeed. That was one I've always loved. And we even went back and reread all the Stanley Kirby stuff, and I think what we saw was that I don't want to say that the character's inconsistent, but I think he's flexible. And I've talked about this before, but like in the way that Batman is, that Batman works on an Adam West show, Batman works in a Christopher Nolan movie, he works in a Frank Miller comic, he works in a Brave and the Bold kids cartoon, and I think the character never feels wrong. It always feels like that's Batman. And I think MODOK is like that too. Like I was saying before, he can be that comedic foil in Gwenpool, and then he can be this, Marvel big bad in kind of more serious Avengers stories. And we loved that you can kind of go to all those different places with him. And I think the comic series is investigating that. It's like, how can this guy be all these things? And our answer to that was that this is a character who's, part computer brain. He's constantly murdered. Like, he's died more times, I think, than Jean Grey. And he just gets resurrected and he gets rebooted. So I think those inconsistencies are just different versions of him. And so that's what this is. He suddenly has memories of a version he doesn't recall or can make sense of. And I think, trying to go back and do that, Grant Morrison Batman thing where it's like, it all counts, is a really fun way, because you don't want to discount any stories. They're all really good takes on the character. So let's kind of bring them together for a new story.
So I don't want to ask anything spoilerly about the show, but we've seen a couple of X-Men during your Comics XF interview. Are we going to be seeing any just regular old Marvel characters in the show?
Yes. If you read issue 2 of MODOK Head Games, there's probably 15 characters in that will be popping up in the show. We filled it with a lot of characters we use. Again, some A-list villains and some real deep cut, Marvel Handbook bar with no name regulars. That the people that the Scourge shoots up before going after the bigger guys. I love those guys. I absolutely love the working class super villain who just goes to drink away his sorrows at the bar with no name. Those are my favorite, blue collar super villain, career criminals.
Yep.
So we use a few of those. I think Marvel has some of the best. And and then there's a lot of really big heroes that I can't talk about yet, But we tried to make the series an absolute love letter to the comics, the TV show, and it's stuff that you've been wanting, characters you've been wanting to see, some casting that people have wanted for years too, because we're fans as well. And I think it's going to feel hopefully the most like reading a Marvel comic.
That is such a good answer. Like it sounds like you're selling the show to me exactly, because like one of my favorite villains of all time is Shocker, who is just like a nothing, who just hangs out and probably drinks every night, like at that bar. So very excited.
Through his quilted mask.
He wears a quilt. He wears a quilt out, and Spider-Man kicks the crap out of him. Like that takes guts.
He doesn't just kick the crap out of him. He bullies him too.
Yeah.
And to be fair, it's a functional quilt, right? It absorbs the shock wave. Yep. So it's function over.
Yeah, everybody should be wearing quilted clothes.
Hold on, it's not function over fashion. It is kind of fashionable. It's like a cool chic thing that he does.
Like if you grab your grandma's quilt and you wrap it around your body and you put on Vibro gloves, you'd be the Shocker.
Yeah.
Hold on, I gotta reel myself in.
No.
With MODOK being a family man seemingly in the show, what made you want to approach it that way rather than focus on the floating head supervillain?
Well, we do. We focus on all of it. We're obviously doing much more of a comedic take. I think, we're it's a little more of a satire. It's a little more, Lego Batman, or closer to maybe, Enter the Spider-Verse, tonally. Or Harley Quinn, I think, is another great show. So we wanted to create a life, like the idea of, we know this guy to be this arch villain. We know him to, be violent and relentless and evil. But like, where does he go, when he leaves that Captain America panel? What does he do? He has to go somewhere at night, right? He has to have a life. So what if you followed him home and it turned out he had a family in New Jersey? And we just thought that was like a really fun way to humanize him. And it kind of, worked with the story we wanted to tell, which is that this is a MODOK who has, had aspirations of taking over the world and went astray and kind of lost his drive, or at least lost the clarity of what he was trying to achieve, and has run AIM into the ground. And they can't afford to keep the doors open and try and kill Iron Man and take over the world. So in comes this Google-like company, Grumble, who offers to buy them and says, we're going to be super hands-off. Like we just want to acquire all these brilliant minds, these mad scientists, and you guys keep trying to kill the Avengers, but just give us a tablet by Christmas and we'll stay out of your way. And it ends up being the exact opposite of that, where suddenly MODOK, who is this egomaniac, has to, and this control freak has to answer to a board, or go to HR. And it's about a guy who loses control of his company and essentially his identity, because he's so tied to AIM. And then at the same time, he has this family that he's sort of been neglecting, and his wife asked for a separation. So what we wanted to do was start a series about with a supervillain who loses everything, and kind of break him down. And it's about him having this midlife crisis where he has to figure out what he wants in life, in his career and then with his family. And I think this is a really fun place to start a character, which is like, he can't mind blast these problems away. They're more complex than that. And seeing him fight for that stuff, I think makes for like a really good show.
That's the most amazing thing I've ever heard.
I don't know how you did it, but I'm more excited for MODOK than I am any other comic book property now. Just across the board. That sounds like the single greatest concept for a television show ever.
It's the post-origin origin.
MODOK Jersey Boy. That's all I needed.
Oh, wait. Oh, no. Now we got to... No, never mind. I was going to ask, would he be a Taylor Ham New Jersey guy or a pork roll New Jersey guy? But that's just my instinct to ask.
You have to explain that.
Do you want me to do it, Jake?
Yes.
So, North Jersey and South Jersey, there is a breakfast meat called pork roll. And North Jerseyans call it Taylor ham, and South Jerseyans call it pork roll. It is the meat which is called pork roll, but there's a brand called Taylor ham, kind of like Kleenexes. You call them Kleenexes instead of tissues.
Right.
And it is this heated debate. Like, this is like DC versus Marvel, like those kind of like the people just slugging it out in the streets over this breakfast ham.
And this is really like secluded to Jersey because I grew up 40 minutes from Jersey and I've never heard of this.
Yep. The Taylor ham pork roll debate. And I worked in a deli in college and in North Jersey, and they call it Taylor ham, but I was like a spy. Like I'm a pork roll guy. But yeah, it's like a very South Jersey and North Jersey are two very distinct worlds. But knowing MODOK is like all the bad stuff happens in New York City and Marvel, he's probably a North Jersey guy. So he's Taylor ham, I think.
I mean, knowing him, he would just call it MODOK meat and claim that it's his, and he invented it. So.
MODOK meat. All right, that's canon now.
You want a log of MODOK meat?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, with the comic taking place in the 616 and the show being its own thing, will there be any references to the comic in the show, or no? Because you already said that the comic was written after the show. Oh boy.
Yeah, I mean, we use a lot of similar characters, in both. The Adaptoid pops up in the comic and he's a main character, and the same with Monica Rappaccini. So there's a lot of kind of sharing of characters, and I don't want to ruin it yet, but you're going to find out about the characters from the show, how they work within the Marvel universe. The one thing we didn't want to do was like shoehorn them in and just be like, we created these characters, so now they have to exist here. Like, no, they have to make sense. They're two different worlds. So, I don't want to get into it too much because it'll kind of ruin the fourth issue, but it won't be probably what you're expecting.
All right. So was yours and Patton's collaboration any different on the comic as it was on the show, or the same style?
It was the same. I think the benefit we had, though, was we had just spent over a year or so with MODOK, and we had read every comic, and we had written at this point 10 episodes. So we were even more well-versed than when we started the show. And also Patton had spent all this time being MODOK and recording as him. So it was so fun to write with him because he would just pitch lines and that's the voice I hear as MODOK now. And he knows exactly how MODOK would state something because he's been living in that giant head. So it was just a blast to sit down and then, have MODOK there with you, telling you what he would say.
I can only imagine when you got to the comic, it was all of those thoughts that you had about that came after the show. You're like, oh, I should have done that. Here's my chance. But
yeah, there was some of that. We had talked about doing that supervillain trade show thing as an episode. But we just never got around to it, and it didn't fit into some of the bigger plans for the season. So that was kind of one where we had that in our back pocket of I still like this idea. Maybe we could, this would work for an issue in the comic. But outside of that, I think everything else was kind of new. And, there's a few moments that are kind of different versions of things maybe we did on the show. That are maybe a little more grounded or more serious, but we wanted to use Gwenpool. She's not on, in the show. But it was a character who's deeply tied to MODOK's comic history. So that was kind of what we wanted to do with the comic, is that MODOK's, in looking for answers for what's happening to him and what these memories are, it sort of is a tour through his own comic history. We're going through AIM, Iron Man, Gwenpool, the Serpent Society pops up in issue 2. He's sort of revisiting these touchstones in his own history as he's searching for answers for things he doesn't understand.
Uh-oh. Someone's flipping the switch. All right. So, flipping the switch, that doesn't make any sense. I'm mixing my metaphors. Dan's changing something on the script. What were some of the TV inspirations for the show?
I think we one of the things we really wanted to do was to not just make a sitcom, with these characters. We really wanted it to be a big action-packed Marvel Universe adventure where he's dealing with very relatable issues kind of against that backdrop. So, I think Rick and Morty does such a good job of telling these huge, big, sci-fi epics while still, making you really invest in the characters and the dynamics between them. And, so I think that was a big one for us. And weirdly, Mad Men came up a lot in the writer's room. And there's actually a nod to it in one of the episodes. So that's not probably at all what people are expecting. But, I think with a lot of the AIM office related stuff, we kept using Mad Men as a reference for certain scenes. It'll make more sense when you see it, but it won't. It's not going to be a period drama our show.
I mean,
but I don't know. It's a funny thing. Most comedy rooms, I feel like we usually talk. Most of us just watch dramas. Weirdly, comedy writers, and that's like kind of a point of reference for a lot of the things that we came up with. But that, and we pulled from the comics. We had the Marvel handbooks in the writer's room, and we found some really obscure things that kind of opened up story avenues and were organic to the types of stories we were telling. So it pulled from everywhere.
So on the topic of writing comedy, what was it like writing one of the greatest creations of all in all of animation, Roger Smith?
It's a blast because he can be a sociopath and he's instantly forgivable. I don't know why. I don't know if it's the design or Seth's voice, but he does horrible things on a weekly basis, and you love him for it. So he's a great character, right? And the formula of American Dad, which they figured out very early in the best way, is that Roger can be any guest star you need or plot device or whatever, because he inhabits these roles and these personas. So if you watch American Dad, there's not a ton of guest star heavy. It's not like The Simpsons where it's like, oh, we got the Rolling Stones on, this weekend. It's like, oh, Roger will just be the guest star as this character. So
just Roger dresses
against The Simpsons. By the way, I'm a huge Simpsons fan, so do not think that I'm shitting on The Simpsons and propping American Dad up. We all live in the shadow of The Simpsons. The Simpsons is amazing. But no, that that's the fun of the character is he can be what you need him to be, and it doesn't feel like lazy writing. It's like, oh, that's built into the character.
I'm just imagining Roger dressed as Mick Jagger.
Oh, I would love Roger to cross over and interact with them. They would not get along. I will say that. I do not think that would be a good pairing. Actually, who Roger and the Super Adaptoid, I think, would really hit it off in our show. John Daly plays him on MODOK, and I think they would be quite a pair.
Wait, John Daly?
Yes, not the golfer. The hilarious actor.
Yeah, from
dodged a bullet.
Oh man, give me it. I gotta make sure I'm not losing my mind here.
Kroll Show.
Yeah, from the Kroll Show. God, I'm so pumped for the show. All right, sorry, Jake, you can keep going.
Do you find the humor in your writing varies a lot on the style of the show? For example, will fans of the humor for American Dad enjoy the humor for MODOK?
Yes, I think there's definitely some similarities in the joke writing and stuff. I think tonally, they live in the same neighborhood. Absolutely. I think the biggest difference with MODOK versus American Dad is American Dad is episodic, like a lot of the Fox shows are, and which is very freeing on one hand. But I think what we wanted to do with MODOK is it's much more heavily serialized. And, I think on a lot of, older adult animated shows, you kind of undercut everything you know, and because everything kind of has a reset button at the end of it. But I think we really wanted you to care and invest in these characters. So I think people will be shocked that, yes, like the humor can be as insane or raunchy or crazy as American Dad, but MODOK actually has a ton of heart to it, which is something that I was really excited about doing, of letting the characters grow and change over the season. Like the episodes don't have that kind of like, all right, it's the end of the show, you know, let's wrap it up. Everyone forgives everyone, you know, back to normal. You know, this is a messy character with messy relationships, and they don't always work out with that kind of perfect sitcom ending. So, you know, I think that's kind of the biggest difference between the two shows.
So before you ask the next question, I wanted to ask about the serialization of the show, but I'll be honest and tell you, the word serial just disappeared from my mind, and I was like, I don't know how to ask this, so I'm going to leave it off. So I'm glad you mentioned it.
So about the serialization of the show, like,
yeah, like it's gonna, so it'll be serialized, like it'll be a through line through all the different episodes rather than doing episodic.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think each episode tells a full story, and but at the same time, we're tracking MODOK as he has, you know, kind of two goals, which is I need to somehow get control back of AIM, and figure out if, you know, this is still what I want to do and who I am. And the same thing with his family. His goal is to just win them back. But I think to achieve both of those goals, he has to change as a person. And we're really tracking that. And, you know, there's through lines kind of for each character. His son, Lou, played by Ben Schwartz, has an upcoming bar mitzvah. So a lot of the story is, you know, kind of centered against that, you know, that which kind of leads to our finale. The finale of our MODOK show is set at a bar mitzvah. So, you know, like I think each character is kind of grappling with something, and we track it throughout the season, and there's betrayals and crazy sci-fi twists, and, you know, we have multiple big bads, and, you know, so there's a lot of stuff that, you know, is continuing in each episode, but at the same time, I think hopefully you can watch one and feel like you get a full story as other storylines are kind of, you know, progressing.
Awesome.
So this has come up twice in my brain so far. Do you guys think MODOK has a heart, like physically? Like,
yeah,
I don't know how his organs work.
Yeah, well, you're in luck. I guess read MODOK Head Games issue 3 and 4, actually. We'll give you a little more about MODOK anatomy and the show.
Hot.
Maybe more than you want to know. But,
MODOK
I'm going to get to know about how his organs work and everything. Great.
Yeah, no, but literally you will see inside MODOK. So yes, we address that. Absolutely.
I drew a little doodle of MODOK, and I'm just looking at him like, I don't know how this guy works.
Well, I will say we have a scene in the show where he is out of his hover chair, and the discussions with the puppet fabricators at Stupid Buddy, the puppet builders, like they were lengthy, and we kept going back. We're like, the head should be even bigger, and the body needs to be small. And like, we can't make it any smaller. You know, like we kept trying to figure it out because there's some art of him outside of the chair. So it was a lot of back and forth to get. That was like the hardest thing to nail, was like proportionally, what does MODOK look like outside of the chair?
Well, as the good book says, everybody poops.
The good book.
Yeah, everybody poops, right? That's a book.
Classic. My children love it.
How is writing for animation different than live action, like Community?
Well, you know, what's funny is, you know, us doing stop motion for MODOK, it's more like live action than American Dad in 2D, because you have sets and you have, you know, they need to be lit, and we have motion controlled cameras that are doing this handheld photography for stop motion, which is crazy. And you know, to me, it was kind of like a weird in between point, you know, from my experiences on Community and American Dad. We're kind of both skill sets applied to making the show, but it's it made it a much longer shoot, but I think it'll be very unique and very different. Stupid Buddy is fantastic, and the exciting thing was they didn't want to just do Robot Chicken. Like Robot Chicken looks like toys because that's the conceit, right, of the show. This is much more polished and much more closer to like a Leica feel than I would say like a Robot Chicken feel. And the craftsmanship that went into it, from the tiniest little ultimate nullifier prop that they had to make to the the huge Asgard sets, it's gorgeous and it's cool, and it's so neat to see the Marvel universe kind of done on this miniature scale with these puppets. So I think it'll be a really cool, different take on the Marvel universe.
So this is my hard-hitting journalism question. If you had to make a Rube Goldberg machine, what would its purpose be?
That's a great question, because I'm a lazy person, so there's a million things I could think of that I wouldn't want to get up to do.
Exactly. That's the point of this question. I love it.
I'll tell you what. I mean, you got me thinking sandwiches right now. So a Rube Goldberg thing that will perfectly make maybe a chicken cutlet on a wedge. It would deep fry it. Know exactly when to take it out. Lather up that honey mustard, and then it would somehow kind of roll. Like I wouldn't even get up. Like I would still be laying down, so it would somehow roll to my chin to do the least amount of work possible to eat a sandwich.
I like that.
Honey mustard gets everywhere.
I mean, that's the cost of being lazy. There's some honey mustard everywhere. You still could eat the sandwich.
I mean, The machine would then have to somehow it would have to have like a napkin, right, on maybe like a windshield wiper that would then wipe
just
my
slap
face,
you in the
right?
face.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
slaps it. Exactly.
Kids, don't bother Daddy. He's in his chicken cutlet machine.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Does MODOK have a chicken cutlet machine?
I think he needs one for season 2 now. That sounds like a great. I mean, he does some lazy shit in the show, so it would not be out of character for MODOK to build one of those.
So, Jordan, thank you so much for joining us. MODOK, the show is coming out soon, and the 3rd issue will be out February 17th. Is there anything else you want to promote?
No, not really. Thank you for having me. And yeah, there's going to be some big announcements for the show coming up in the next few weeks, and you guys will be getting a trailer soon and all that good stuff. So look for that soon. I know people have been waiting patiently. Stop motion and COVID have taken a little time, but I promise you it is coming, and there's going to be some really cool things announced very soon.
Well, you can catch us at gatecrashers.fan or on Twitter at gatecrasherspod, and we'll see you next week.
Gatecrashers.